Are you looking for an air fryer, but you're still not all that sure which device is the right one? Well, over the past few years, we have tested many devices. And today you'll not only learn about the different types of air fryers, but also which devices we find to be the best in each category. And altogether, this will sum up our top 5. So just stay tuned. Somewhere around 5 liters capacity, a typical construction with a removable drawer consisting of a tub and cooking basket or inlays. This is it, the classic air fryer as we know it. And yeah, they still exist today. And they can still be worth it if you are willing to accept one fundamental disadvantage. Namely, these type of devices are relatively basic and have few features, at least compared to the other categories that we have in this test. However, the fundamental advantage is that the devices are usually somewhat cheaper. For the top spot in this category, we decided on the Philips HD 9270 with a rating of 87%. It is a somewhat older device, and it is a bit inferior to some more modern devices, especially in regards to the operation and handling. The display, in particular, seems a bit outdated, but we reviewed it once more. And the cooking results can still keep up today, maybe a little worse than newer devices, but overall, the fries turned out great, just as well as the potato wedges. Chicken wings and muffins turn out good as well. Another upside is that this is a branded device. We occasionally see it on sale for around $100. So if you're looking for a simple but well-working air fryer, grab this one when it's on sale. If you are not a fan of Philips, you might also opt for the Cosori XXL. Just like the one from Philips, this is an older model but still quite usable today. Maybe a few more compromises compared to Philips. For instance, it's a bit louder, but the cooking results were similarly good. So if that doesn't bother you, you'll be quite satisfied. You can also get both devices in a digital version if you want to. That's another subcategory. These are exactly the same as the Philips or the Cosori devices, except that they can be completely controlled via an app. So you can virtually cook your food from the couch with your smartphone, which some might find quite nice. However, the devices have slightly different names. With Philips, it's not the HD 9270, but the HD 9280. And that one would be our winner in this subcategory with 91%. With Cosori, I believe it's called Cosori Smart Wi-Fi or something. But whatever they're called, don't worry about that. Just look below the video in the description. We'll link the devices for you there. And what we'll also include are our individual reviews. So if you want a few more details about one of the air fryers, feel free to take a look around. Let's move on to the next category, which is the so-called dual-chamber air fryers. Originally, we categorized them as practical devices. Back then, something like the Klarstein Vitaire Turbo with its dome-shaped top was included as well. But by now, it's clear that the dual-chamber devices have prevailed. Having 2 cooking chambers available is just super practical. Nevertheless, there is also a fundamental disadvantage here. In order for both cooking chambers to be practically usable on their own, the capacity needs to be somewhat larger, and accordingly, the devices themselves are relatively large, and you first have to find a fitting place for them in the kitchen. However, the size is also an advantage. Normally, the capacity is much larger than with standard air fryers. If you combine both cooking chambers, it generally starts at around 8 liters for most dual-chamber devices. But not only that, of course, you also have the advantage. And that's what these dual-chamber devices are about, that you can prepare 2 foods at the same time. So, if you want to make nuggets and fries for the kids and have both ready at the same time, then that's easily possible with these devices. Pretty ideal for the family. For the top spot in this category, we determined the Philips Dual Basket Series 3000 with a rating of 90%. We know Philips again, but don't worry, we're not getting sponsored by them or anything. We just strictly follow our rating system. And Philips has recently released some new devices that performed quite well, including the Dual Basket. And what the Dual Basket does particularly well is that it captures the spirit of the times quite well. On one hand, it is relatively large with 9 liters, but when you stand in front of it, it still seems relatively compact. On the other hand, it also reflects the current trend of installing 2 differently sized cooking chambers. And that's an important point, simply because it's much more user-friendly. Let's stick with the example of nuggets and fries. We usually have more fries than nuggets in terms of quantity, and it's quite handy to have a larger and a smaller compartment. It's similar when you want to prepare chicken. In this case as well, a larger compartment is quite useful. Of course, there are already other devices that have different sized compartments like the Tefal Dual Easy Fry, but overall, we'd recommend the Philips Dual Basket. It has a better heat management, the large cooking chamber is bigger, and probably the most important point are the cooking results. Philips actually provided slightly better results. Just a bit more even, a bit crispier. You don't really see it when you put the individual cooking results side by side, but you notice it when eating. If Philips is not an option for you, as some people have a preference against certain brands, then we'd recommend our previous winner, and that'd be the Ninja AF400. It has a capacity of 9.5 liters in total. So in terms of size, it outshines all the others here. And on top of that, it is made a little more high quality, like with real buttons and dials instead of a touchscreen, and also makes a bit more of an impact with the operation concept featuring the sync and match system. The Philips also has this. It synchronizes the cooking times of the two cooking compartments, so both sections are finished at the same time. But with Ninja, it's just made a little more prominently, and it's just a bit easier to understand. The main disadvantage, however, is that the slightly older Ninja unfortunately does not yet have the concept of the differently sized compartments. An interesting new category, in my opinion, are the Airfryer ovens. Here too, I have this feeling that more and more devices are coming to the market, and I think you can already see a little bit about what this means. Visually, the whole thing is very reminiscent of a classic oven, just like the one you normally have in your kitchen, with a window to look inside. Usually there's also interior lighting and a classic oven door. So as I said, it really strongly resembles a classic oven. And that is basically the main disadvantage of these devices. Namely, why should I get a second oven? However, these devices also have some interesting advantages. One of them is the size. Usually these devices have a capacity of around 12 liters. Unfortunately, the capacity is not as well utilized as with traditional air fryers or dual chambers. But in terms of values, these are more or less the largest volumes available when it comes to air fryers. In addition, these devices often come with a few more functions and usually have a rotisserie mode. And that is one of the main advantages. You usually don't have that in a home oven. And for those who like to make chicken or a roast or something similar, it's not just a simple air fryer, but also offers a few more options. For the top spot in this category, our test system even identified two devices that are tied. Specifically, with 84%, they are the Cosori R121 and the Stillstern Multifry. The Cosori scored some points mainly because it can not only dehydrate, but also proof. Accordingly, it also has a slightly larger temperature range. Additionally, Cosori is quite a good brand. As a result, you have a slightly better handle on the basics, meaning a slightly better manufacturing and also the somewhat better heat management. Moreover, we also achieved good results with air frying, and the spit roast was pretty great, so there's not much more to say. The Stillstern, on the other hand, stood out for us due to its cooking basket. That's not a given with these air fryer ovens. In addition to baking trays and racks, you often get a cooking cage only. You can certainly use that too. It has its advantages, but a cooking basket just utilizes the space in these devices a bit better. As a result, you can prepare bigger quantities of food, and that's a good thing, of course. Okay, and then Stillstern also has some skewers included. That's obviously nice as well, because you get to utilize the rotisserie mode in different ways. Ultimately, which one you choose is naturally up to you. As a reminder, you'll find the links to our individual reviews below the video, so take a look if you want to find out what the devices can and cannot do. Let's move to the next category, which is the multifunctional air fryers. I know this is not a precise distinction, because even the air fryer ovens are essentially multifunctional devices, as they include a rotisserie and a dehydrating function, for example. But what I ultimately mean here are devices whose sole purpose is to perform several very different cooking functions. For example, an air fryer and grill in one. And I really mean grill, not just a button that says grill. You see that with many air fryers. But in the end, it's just a gimmick. A multifunctional device really needs to be designed and conceptualized as such. And I think it starts with us gradually, but surely seeing more and more of these devices on the market. But the whole thing is still at a relatively early stage. Until now, to be completely honest, we have only tested one of these devices, simply because there are not many available yet. However, this one device was already very convincing. In fact, it has a rating of 91%, the Ninja AG551. You can already see a bit of the disadvantage with these kinds of devices. Just realize that you can't have absolutely everything. So for example, you don't have a traditional cooking basket here, and therefore have to turn the food with a spoon, which is naturally much more cumbersome than shaking with a traditional air fryer. But aside from these minor drawbacks, you have two fully functional features. In this case, air frying and grilling. And in that regard, it's a really awesome device. The grill function makes sausages just like from a gas grill. Absolutely no kidding. You can really see it in the crispy skin the sausages get, and you can also sear a steak perfectly here. And you also have a barbecue thermometer that you can connect to the appliance to ensure that the food is cooked correctly. Then the machine can automatically do rare, medium, or whatever you'd like. And here's the thing. On the other side, I make my fries, my nuggets, my wings, and even my muffins. Well, this hot air function works just as well here in terms of the results as it does with a classic air fryer. Overall, a great device. The dual function makes it incredibly practical. Yes, you have to make a few compromises, but especially for me as a meat lover, it's definitely my personal favorite. One can definitely look forward to where this category is headed and what other devices will come. Let's move on to our last category, which is currently probably one of the most important ones, because what we also see in the market is that manufacturers are trying to outdo each other with hybrid forms. So basically devices that are some kind of a mix of the categories we have mentioned so far. They then try to take the best features of the different categories and combine them into one device, which sometimes works better and sometimes worse. The main disadvantage is obvious. You can't have absolutely everything. If you try to cram too much into one device, it admittedly can do a lot, but nothing particularly well. However, the fundamental advantage can also be quite significant if the device is well made. In that case, you have a device that can simply do a lot, and that's obviously not bad. And that's exactly what you can see from our top ranking. Pretty much the best results we had so far. We have a shared first place with a whopping 92% performed by the Philips Series 7000 XXL as well as the Cosori Turbo Blaze. Let's start with the Philips Series 7000. Basically, it's a standard air fryer, but size-wise, at 8.3 liters, it's as large as a double chamber. We have app remote control included, so the digital approach is also covered. Then we have so-called auto-cook programs, basically improved presets. We also have 2 ventilation levels, which allow you to control how much power the device should apply. So this can be attributed partly to the practical approach, and partly it's just something new. So you can tell that an attempt is being made here to solve as many problems as possible all at once. Similarly, the Cosori Turbo Blaze does this too, but it is not such a holistic approach, but rather a very specific one. The focus here is clearly on the ventilation settings and the attempt to cook the food faster. And what can we say? The Turbo Blaze can indeed perform better than Philips in that regard. You can cook 20 to 30% faster with it and faster than other air fryers. And they are already much faster than a classic oven. So you see, you can save a lot of time. Overall, the Cosori is a very solid device and, in my opinion, absolutely deserves its strong rating. However, improved presets, an oversized cooking space, or an app remote control are nowhere to be found here. On the other hand, that's exactly what the Philips offers, as it takes a somewhat more holistic approach. So, what choice is the right one? If you already know which device excites you the most, then take a look in the description below the video. You can find all the links there. And if you're still not all that sure, you'll also find our individual reviews there. Those have more details about the device in question, and hopefully that'll help you find the right appliance for you.